With Republican state legislators around the country seeking to tighten voting rules, CBS News finds most Americans would prefer the process to stay the same or become easier. Coming off of record voter turnout in 2020, a new CBS News poll finds relatively few people want voting to become harder ahead of the 2022 midterms. This despite a continued onslaught of disproven claims of election fraud by former President Trump and his allies. At least 17 states have passed more restrictive voting laws since the last election. Efforts to pass legislation protecting voting rights on the federal level have stalled in the Senate. The CBS News Elections and Surveys Unit is working on a study that takes a look at voting in America. And for more on this, let's bring in CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. Hi there, Anthony. Good to talk to you again. So let's dig into these numbers. How do Americans feel about voting in 2020, and what do they want changed?
Hey there, Elaine. So as you mentioned, you saw this record turnout in 2020, and you know that during the pandemic, all these states put into place different measures that ostensibly made it a little bit easier for people to cast ballots. Well, the first thing when you look at how people react to that is that in principle, more people want those to remain in place. Then you look at, in general, whether or not people think the voting process itself, that's the act of registering to vote, the process of casting a ballot, ought to be easier or left alone or harder. And on balance, you've got people who say that it should be easier or not change. You've got this smaller number there out of the pluralities to say that it should be harder. So that's the context for what you're seeing going on now in all the states. But then the final point on this that you've got to look at is the partisan difference. As you mentioned at the top, this is something that is really being driven by a lot of Republican legislatures. And so you see differences, and I'll point these out here. This 56%, these are rank and file Republicans, who think that voting ought to, in principle, become harder. And that's driven by, as you mentioned, that suspicion that they have, those disproven, unproven claims about what might have happened in 2020.
So then, Anthony, do people think changing voting rules could have an impact on future election results?
Okay, now that's where you want to understand all the context of this. And you look at whether or not people think that, okay, if voting becomes harder, what happens? Well, on balance, Americans think, well, that might help Republicans win elections. And then you ask, well, what happens if voting gets easier? And on balance, people think, well, that'll help Democrats win election more so than Republicans. And then when you look at that within the parties, you really see the way they shape this struggle. They each see their own fortunes as potentially in peril, and Democrats particularly so. You look at what Republicans think will happen if voting gets easier, and a majority of them think that that'll help Democrats win. And then you ask Democrats what happens if, as you think is happening, things get harder to vote, and a majority of Democrats think that advantages Republicans. So that, again, for context, as you see the parties really fighting hard over it, their rank and file have absorbed what that messaging is, that each of them thinks that the other side is going to benefit depending on how these rules change, Elaine.
And on that point, part of what makes these polls so unique is that they look specifically at who believes they would gain or lose power should voting rules change. What did you find on that front, Anthony?
Yeah, you start to break down these partisan differences a little bit more, and you see the constituencies that majorities support each of the parties are the ones that they think might be more in play, might be more subject to being affected by these changes. Take a look. If voting is easier, who gains, who loses? Republicans think that, on balance, neither of these two groups, the majority of whom voted for Republicans in recent elections, white people, people in rural areas, gain not so much, lose more so than gain, though. And that, then you look at that, the way the Democrats look at some of their constituency groups, If voting gets harder, who do they think loses power? And you get these big numbers who think that Hispanic voters, who think that black voters will lose power, and this is a very strongly held opinion among Democrats. So again, setting that context, not just that the party, but that some of their core constituency groups are also potentially going to suffer. That's what they believe. Now, is that necessarily true across the board? Well, the key thing here I want to add is when you talk about voting harder and easier, there's often a sort of presumption that that then leads to turnout changes. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. There's a mix of studies on this. Some people say, look, voters are voters. And some people say when you change the rules, it can help or advantage one party over the other because of turnout. But there are areas where turnout went up, that Republicans did well. There are areas where Republicans did worse. There are areas where turnout went up and Democrats did well, and areas where they didn't perform as well. There are states where President Trump won that turnout was higher. So the correlation between this is kind of all over the place. It's very dependent on the areas and the places concerned, Elaine.
Yeah, that's a really important note, Anthony, because there is so much nuance as I was looking through your report, and people need to kind of keep that in mind as they look at some of these numbers. Well, a new report finds that public opinion polls in the 2020 presidential election overestimated the margin between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And Anthony, that doesn't necessarily mean CBS News surveys, but what are pollsters saying about why that might be, and how should people think about polling in 2020?
Well, I'm glad for the question, and I'm glad you mentioned there, Elaine, that it doesn't necessarily apply to CBS News polling. Look, let me say a couple of things about that. One is that you have to ask whether the polls, taken as a whole, got the story right. Because at the end of the day, that's what people want to know. Which way is this election going? And it's got to be said that they did. Okay? The polls, in general, pointed to a Joe Biden victory, and Joe Biden won. So that's point number one. The second point is, yeah, when you talk about the polls, as I just did, and as the reports that you mentioned do, it's a little bit like saying baseball, okay? You can talk about the state of the game, but the fact is that within the game, there are some teams that have better records than others. There are some teams that are doing better than others. And the fact is, and I've got to sort of, toot our own horn a little bit here, the CBS News poll did better in 2020. And we were able to not only get the story right, but we told you that there were states like Georgia, like Arizona, where Joe Biden could win. We told you that there were states in the upper Midwest where Joe Biden could win and that Donald Trump could win, places like Ohio. And the other part of this, too, is you look at the range of possibilities when things get described. So you look at polls and you look at a point number on it. But I think what's important to do, and what we do here, is we tell you what could happen. We said it could be that Donald Trump will get a surge in turnout that will push this closer. We reported that, and in fact, that did happen. We reported that Democrats could put in place some of the states I mentioned. That also happened. For the sort of news you can use takeaway on this, number one, remember, folks, not all polling is the same. Number two, look at polls that describe a range of possibilities in real-world political terms. And finally, just a sort of state of the industry, state of the business, we use a lot of data in our polling. We're looking at voters whose voting records we can validate against public databases. We're looking at a lot of different components, all of which are incorporated into our polling models. It is getting more difficult to just go out there and grab a sample of voters. People are busy. Some people are reluctant to answer polls. So you've got to bring in all of that other data, which we try to do. And when I communicate all of that to our viewers, hopefully people, and the viewers of this show recognize that we go that extra mile and bring you a little more data in it.
Yeah, we always appreciate that, Anthony. And by the way, conducting all of this research and doing these surveys and these polls in a pandemic just added, I know, a whole nother universe of complications for you and your team. So we really appreciate you breaking that down for us. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much.
Thank you.